Jowetts are more than a car. They're part of the family, and you're part of the Jowett family. Well, my first javelin was my third car after a couple of motor scooters at university, then a Morris 8, and then a 1941 Austin 8. I was looking at buying a Mark I Consul, 150 quid, had a brand new orange peel paint job, looked at it over the weekend, was going to buy on the Monday, and lo and behold, my brother-in-law-to-be, David Christie, came up from Christchurch in a 1953 green PE Javelin. Well, my gosh, that had leather seats, wooden dashboard, full instrumentations, torsion bar suspension, and goes bloody well. So the Consul lost the race there, and I picked up a Javelin for 140 quid, and that was like 58 years ago. So it had the leather seats, and it had the pull-down armrests, it had column change and walnut dashboard and all of those sort of things. So, and then of course it was a little bit quirky, and it looked a bit different than the box cars that were around in the early 50s. Before I bought my second Jupiter, I saw a Morgan for sale, and I looked at that and I thought about it, and my Jupiter was a bucket of bolts and waiting to be done up, and I nearly bought that, but I think my sister said, you've got Jowett blood. If you want a sports car, get another Jupiter. And I did, and I'm glad I did. The only other car that did tickle my fancy was the one that my uncle, who lived next door to us, had, and also he had a black one, and my Scoutmaster had a green one, and that was a 1938 Triumph Dolomite. Long nose on it, big chrome grille, big chrome headlights, big chrome driving lights, big external chrome horns. And I remember it had a blind in the back that you could pull up and down, and that was a really regal looking car. I had the opportunity to buy one. I've only seen 3 in my life, but no, the Jowetts got there because you get tangled up, like Jowetts are more than a car. They're part of the family, and you're part of the Jowett family. Well, the branch was formed in 1962 by Noel Palmer, and he came up to Auckland in August 1963, and he had an inaugural meeting up here where it was attended by 36 members. And so the branch was formed with on that day with Charlie King, a stalwart of the club, being the first branch chairman. And of course, Charlie went on to be club president and had a number of Jowetts. And yeah, he had an interest in Citroens, and he actually won a bronze medal at the Commonwealth Games, I think. The club was fairly active. Monthly newsletter went out, and of course, Flat 4 was coming from day one. So that's how we communicated. And of course, the branch grew. The club grew too, because the first Taupo run was in '67. That was called the Mid-Island Jowett Rally, which predominantly had Wellington and Auckland people meet together, and that somewhere between 1967 and 70 something, because that became the national rally when people started coming across. And it stayed at Taupo for a long time, because I guess the bulk of the cars were in the North Island where the population was. Because the cars were daily drivers and represented the population rather than the enthusiasm that might exist now in the South Island. And of course, '76, we went to Blenheim for the first time for a national rally, and then since then they've been swapping around backwards and forwards. So yeah, and back in the old days there, it's interesting that Neil Moore, who's another club stalwart, his membership number is 442, and he's the oldest serving member in New Zealand, and yet his membership's 442. So a lot of members back there represents a lot of cars on the road. So he was 442, Bob Culver, 560, Ellen Stanley, 611, Lorna Johns, she's got 382, but she's got her dad's number. So she inherited her father's car, which happens, and she inherited his membership. So she's a bit of an outlier. And of course, your dad's 174, and he was one of the founding members for the Christchurch branch, and that was in 1964, I think. And so obviously there was 74 members ahead of him then. Yeah, well, when I joined, Charlie King was the chairman, and there was a woman who was the secretary. Her name was Thelma Moss. I remember her. She had vivid ginger hair, and I lived in Kingsland, and her car was always parked on the street. And so I saw that when I was going to and from school. They are the two early people I remember. But back then, of course, a lot of the early members around my time were in fact friends and associates of myself because of that thing called Jowettitis. The number of people that I infected were the stalwarts of the Auckland branch. You know, my mother and father got one, my sister got one, my friend up the road got one, Barry Moore from Scouts got one, Robert Smith from Scouts got one, Barry's mother and father got one, Barry's sister got one. It just went on. And so one day I'm going to write a little Jowett tree. And it all started for me, but from my brother-in-law, Dave Christie. So he's the top of my Jowett tree, and then I come down, and then all the tentacles, they all spread out. And so, yeah, some of the early people around there were all part of friends. So, you know, Jowett sat in our own backyards for people who were visiting as friends rather than Jowett people. Well, I think the Jowett Car Club's peppered with techno guys. Um, guys, you know, we know them, who they are. They, they're attracted to Jowetts because Jowetts are technically sophisticated for their time, and also requiring technical ongoing, which you probably can't get through the local garage. So that's one of the attractions of Jowett cars. Then, of course, they are a nice car. They are leather. People still look at them and say, oh, look at that, look at the armrests and all that. So they're a nice car. They are probably visually appealing to people still. Some people say they're ugly. They are, you know, contrasting. So they are. And then, of course, when you talk about what attracts them to Jowetts, there is people who are attracted to Jowetts solely because of the club scene and the membership. Well, we used to panic the week before national rallies. You know, the cars, I remember if I, one day I broke a gearbox in my Jupiter. So I went out and bought a Javelin just to get the gearbox out of it. And then 2 weeks later, I broke another gearbox. You know, I was 22 years old, and every car at the traffic lights, I put it into first gear. And of course, after 2 gearboxes in 2 weeks, I put it into storage, and it never came out. But we used to panic a bit because the cars weren't as well maintained as they were today. You'd be changing the spark plugs the night before, and of course you'd only get as far as the Bombays, and one of them failed. So there was the national rallies were interesting. We'd go down in a semi-convoy, and because of the sloping back of the Jowett Javelin, we had what we call the taper tail team, and that consisted of the Moores, the Stanleys, and the Hansons. And we all had car names. My car was the Brown Bomber. There was the Green Hornet. There was the Blue Flash. There was the Fawn Phantom, and there was the Green Leprechaun. And they were the cars that would go down to national rallies. Pretty, you know, that was a tight group that would go to all the national rallies, and that. And, you know, some of the things about it going to national rally, some of the pleasures were the breakdowns, you know, fixing the car on the side of the road and getting them home. They didn't all get home. Got memories of pulling them off from Mount Ruapehu and getting them up from Wanganui and things like that. Yeah. It's some pretty good nick. Yeah, we have problems with what's happening in 10 years' time, but the branch at the moment is in good nick, and there's a couple of reasons for that, I think. Um, One is, well, most of the members are solid members. They've had the cars for 10 years and things like that. So people have got cars now, and they're not daily roaders. They've selected them as their hobby. And as long as they're able and financial and physically capable, they're going to keep driving them. And so the branch now consists of people that are full of got hobby cars, and also people who are, in a demographic where they can afford it. Others come and go. People buy them, and if they're not long time people, they buy them, and they don't get quite into the Jowett, and they're not attached to it. So when anything happens, they will sell up. But the branch is pretty known to be a friendly branch. And one of the other things that we have is in the South Island is we've got the car shed up here, and we're very fortunate to have that on a member's property. And we've got up there, we've got a hoist, and we've got a compressor and a tire changing machine and grinders and welders, tools for Africa. And probably most of the cars that are running around come in now for a pre-warrant fitness check and get fixed. A lot of people perhaps wouldn't even have their Jowetts if that wasn't there. We have some lady members who really couldn't service their cars and probably don't get in the best service if they take them to the local garage. And so there's people who I am absolutely certain would not be owning a car if they couldn't ring up and bring it up the shed. And that shed is also very popular with the club because it acts as a men's shed. And so we've got people who have come along there just because they're interested. They come along, they have a cup of tea, they get their hands dirty, and then occasionally they buy a Jowett. There's 3 or 4 examples of that. Occasionally they will join the club and pay their subs, and others don't even pay their subs, but they come along, and that's okay because they're good guys and they pull their weight. So I think the shed is a marvelous, addition to what the club can offer, along with social activities and spare parts and all that sort of thing. And without that, I don't think the branches would be as strong because people would struggle to find and keep their cars maintained. And the other thing, I think probably we've put about 10 cars through the shed that would have possibly not got back on the road. So we're also serving not only for our own pleasure and our own cars, we're serving the life of the Jowett marque as well. Yeah, we can, as a club, we can make sure we're sort of proactive for the public. One thing that whenever I run a rally and something I do, every time we park the car, the instructions say, park is the best way to display your Jowetts. So if you turn up at a cafe, you don't just park. You park somewhere over in the corner where you can line them all up. 10 Jowetts make a much greater statement than 10 single Jowetts parked one in, one back, one sideways. So I think as club organisers, we should be just a little bit proactive when we get the cars out in public. Even at the start, if we meet in a supermarket car park, once again, if we're all lined up there, people are going to come across, and Jowett people will talk to them. Open your bonnet, because that's where the secret of the Jowett really is. So there's things like that we can do. Facebook and website, we're on that. What else can we do there to attract our members? Is just be proactive. Newspapers. Every national rally we've organised, we always get the local newspaper to run an article. And the key there is not run the article after we've left town, but run the article before we leave town. And the locals will come out, some of them clutching a photo of their dad's javelin, and do we know where it is, and things like that. So there's little things we can do to attract the membership. And I guess the membership we're looking for now is probably you might say younger membership, but that doesn't mean the 20-year-olds, because they're not going to join. They're not. They're going to be buying a Toyota as their first car. We've got to attract the guys that are 45 years old, kids are left home, looking for their first hobby car. And I think one of the real connections there is what they've done in the past. And that's dwindling a little bit because people are not exposed to Jowetts as kids like they were when they're brand new. When people stop you in the road, they'll say, oh, the doctor used to have one of those. My uncle used to have one of those. I learned to drive on one of those. That doesn't happen now. And so our source of membership is going to be the public or back to the family things. And, there's certainly Jowett DNA. And lots of the members that we've got now, even though they're our age, they still had an association with Jowetts because they, like in my case, it was a car I had when I was 20. And other guys' places, their father had a Bradford or something like that. That's dying out now because Jowetts are no longer daily runners. But we've still got a little bit of family heritage there, and where the Jowett DNA is passed on. And, there's the Morrison family with 4 generations have passed through the club. My own family and 3 generations. Look at the Pegs. There's a whole family and 3 generations of Pegs. And so there's still a little bit of generational membership coming through, but that's going to be very minor. I guess the thing there is you can drive the cars and you can play with them, and you won't be able to play with the car that you had when you were a boy if you're a boy now. So you won't be able to play with your Tesla when it's 50 years old, if it ever is still there when it's 50 years old. So the car's probably going to run, like I don't know, Datsun 180Bs. My son was particularly interested in Toyota Corolla Coupe. It was a 73 or something like that. That was his there. He later on saw the light and started driving my Javelin. So, but yes, there'll still be clubs for them, but I don't know. The clubs will become more social clubs, probably gathering, still have the picnics and the runs, but probably not necessarily the car shows because they're only social things, really. Jowetts have been good to me, and they still are for another few more years. And I think that's the case with most of the strong members.